So my name is Felicitas. I am the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Snowflake for financial services. A little bit about my background. I've spent the past just shy of a decade working across different financial services providers. I'm very excited to now be with Snowflake. We are an AI data platform, and if you've got more questions about what we do, we've got a lovely stand out there. Mercy.
Yes, so my name is Mercy Kanengoni. I am the program lead for customer trust at Snowflake. So my background is I trained in a consulting firm, used to look after external and internal audits. I slowly transitioned to AWS, who some of you probably used, and I used to look after security compliance in the cloud. So some of you will have downloaded the C5 report. Some of you are familiar with FINMA if you work in Switzerland, or Cyber Essentials in the UK. In my current role at Snowflake is very similar to that, but I also look after customer due diligence activities and preparing material to help our regulated entities move into the cloud or use the Snowflake platform. So if some of you send your team security questionnaires, they usually end up in my inbox somehow. We also deliver direct audits. So if it's direct questions on regulations such as DORA, then we'll be available to help you out. But I'm excited to be here today, and it's good to have someone from marketing and consulting and compliance at the same time, so it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I also just love the final question. I think it was one of the final questions in the panel around how to make the buying process a little bit smoother. And I think just from a marketing perspective, maybe to the providers in the room, the idea to really explain what you do can sometimes be quite difficult, and to actually pinpoint what your solution is really, really key. So maybe we can establish a little bit of that today. But really what we wanted to talk about is the topic of regulatory compliance in the cloud. And I think the panel's done a fantastic job to sort of level set, but really where are we at now in 2024? And these are all areas that probably most people in the room are very familiar with. Realistically, if we think about what's happened since 2008, there have been so many macroeconomic events that have had an impact on how globally we look at different regulatory events. When we speak to our customers and to our partners, really there's some key themes that we've identified. And the biggest one being, if you're a global financial institution and you have to comply across different geographies, it's incredibly difficult to manage. And if you don't have a clear strategy there and your risk resilience isn't really up to scratch, you're really looking at just that continued divergence, and it's hard to keep priorities in place. What we've also seen is just that focus on having access to the right data at the right time in real time, and ensuring that you can actually pull the right reports that you can then present back to your regulator. And again, if you have to do that across different entities with different requirements, it's a never-ending activity. What's also a very interesting conversation that we'll continue a little bit later in the presentation is the idea of moving towards multiple cloud environments. So the idea really being that once you are investing in different financial services systems, that they might not all sit in the same environment, and you're actually having to manage these across different cloud service providers, or CSPs as we call them, which can then create a little bit of pressure from the regulator as well. And if you then look at the topic of just around data quality and data analytics, ESG really springs to mind for us. It's a big conversation that we're having at the moment, and how we can comply with that, and how can our customers really comply with that. So when we then really look into the challenges that have arisen, again, ESG has been a big talking point for us. Just thinking about sourcing your off-the-shelf ESG data sets, but also being able to just have that visibility for the regulator, knowing what you actually have to present back, and how you're going to get access to that. Not only for the regulator, but also thinking about what your employees might want to see as what you are producing or not producing, thinking about the climate here. The reliance on different cloud service providers are a little bit under scrutiny from the regulator. We've definitely seen that there is a concern around having a single point of failure, really, depending on where those systems sits that you're using. And then finally, really, as you then start incorporating all of these different regulations that are in flight or have been in flight for a really long time, We are also having loads of conversations around, how can you bring forth more automation, better resilience, and better risk management systems. So I'll hand it over to you now, Mercy, to have a bit of conversation around how you actually can use a cloud platform for that.
Yep, so I hesitate to move to the next slide just because a few things have been mentioned already, but I'm pretty sure if you're in this room, you're a fintech, you work within financial services, you'll be tracking that we've got DORA coming up in January 2025, and this basically really moves towards operational resilience for financial entities, but also we're starting to see an increase in oversight directly for the cloud service providers or the data platforms. Achieving regulatory compliance is not easy. I'm sure a few people have mentioned this already. And you may have also initially questioned, why did we go for regulatory compliance in the cloud rather than regulatory compliance for AI or anything? But it's going back to the fundamentals of the infrastructure that's helping all of us to build all the AI systems and also deliver the services for our customers. I was going to look at two roles today, as you can see from the slide and how it's divided, which is how you're using cloud and data platforms and the interactions within the ecosystem. So firstly, you can think of CSPs like AWS, Snowflake as third-party service providers to the financial entities, or is the platform that you're building on. You'll notice there is an increase, or you would have had a discussion around the shared responsibility model. So what are you responsible for? What is Snowflake responsible for? And what is the infrastructure service provider responsible for? And as the requirements for regulations start to evolve, the expectation on financial entities doesn't move away, which means you still have the obligation to explain to your auditors and your regulators how you've enforced oversight for things like DORA. And in the UK, the FCA and the PRA have a consultation paper that's out on oversight of critical third parties. As service providers, we're all tracking DORA. We're looking ahead to reviewing the new RTSs that come out in July. And similarly, there's a lot of activities that we do to keep monitoring and ahead of the new regulations that affect the financial entities that build on top of the platforms that we provide. Moreover, it's not going to be, once we do DORA, that's it. You'll start to see there's things like the Data Governance Act that start to come beyond 2025 into 2026. You've got the AI Act, and all your teams are busy building and developing and requesting access to use the data that you've already collected. But what is the most secure way to enable your teams to build, but also still meet your regulatory compliance? So with the combination of data cloud platforms, the infrastructure that you already have, existing controls and technologies, it is possible to integrate all of this to build for the AI systems, or be it to integrate all of that into how do you then start to overlap controls from what you already have from operational resiliency, but also the security controls from the AI Act and the Data Governance Act. Lastly, I just wanted to leave two conversations for you to consider. So as I mentioned at the start, there is multiple ways that some of you already use in engaging your service providers to gain assurance over their security controls or operational resiliency. All of that comes back into considering existing functionality that you can use. So with the existing controls that you've got in place with your engineering teams, I strongly encourage conversations with your cloud providers early in preparation for DORA. How are they thinking through it, and what is the responsibility that they're going to take? What evidence are they going to provide to you to enable you to then present that to your regulators and to your auditors in that time? There's about 6 months to get to that, so starting the conversations early would be good. There's things like the AI Act. Again, not trying to hammer AI and LLM. I try and avoid all of that. But then going back to the core controls that we always have, how are you restricting your data access? I think in the previous slide, I actually missed an important point, which is considerations for automation through existing platforms. So you could have things like automated data governance to help you meet both the Data Governance Act and the AI Act. But I think Felicitas started this, which is some of you are maybe on a single cloud platform, some of you are multi-cloud, some of you are multi-region, and having all of that on one platform, not to sell Snowflake, whichever tool you're using, consideration of how to automate some of that data governance will help you to meet all of these controls without reliance on people. I used to be someone, I think, who used to do the manual reviews of some of these controls. Not a great experience, not fun, would not recommend. So as much as you can find automations within the CSPs, they're really good with socializing documentation, but not to throw documentation at you, which is why I was leading to have the conversations early, understand how we as Snowflake or whichever service provider you're using are enabling you to be compliant with DORA, with the AI Act. And then also, not to market my job or to justify my existence at Snowflake, but start to think about how you're going to enforce monitoring and audit for regulatory reporting. Historically, most of the obligation unfairly has sat with the financial entities and having to evidence to your regulators that this is how you meet the compliance expectations. But with more and more of these things coming up, so you've got cybersecurity certifications off the cloud that are being developed. So that might be something that you may want to consider including in your audit scope or including in the questionnaires that you're issuing out. And then also just encouraging a collaborative effort to keep the conversation going, not just beyond the time when you need the evidence, but the earlier that you can do it, the better. Lastly, I just wanted to say I'm excited to see that today there's quite a few conversations on AI that are coming up. It also just shows how much technology is evolving, but also to what was mentioned in a previous conversation, to remember the fundamentals of the infrastructure that you're building on, the software that you're bringing, and the capability that it can provide to meet all of those regulations. And as always, we're around to help. There's compliance teams in all of the CSPs, and happy to have conversations outside as well about this. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to do questions?
Okay.
We've got maybe one question if anyone's got anything, but we're happy to move on. Oh, there's, yeah, sure. I think there was a hand here. And, okay, cool.
Hi, in times of global unrest, excuse me, in times of global, is this turned off?
I can hear you. I'm not sure if it's on or not.
In times of global unrest, as the cloud data shifts from locale to locale,
Yes.
what preventive measures do you have in mind to keep data safe where something might get bombed or cut off through war?
Yes, so that is an interesting one. So as we look into some of the, let me go back a little bit. If I could zoom into this, you would notice, depending on what technology provider you are using, the roles and responsibilities of who looks after what are split and distributed. So if I was to use your example of keeping data secure in a specific locale, so in this instance, maybe you're considering the UK, or maybe you have a multi-region setup where you have Frankfurt, Ireland, and other ones, all your data remains in the region that the customer selects and uses. The only obligation that the customer has in that instance is if you have obligations like DORA, which expect you to have multiple region replication, then you've configured your systems to replicate from London to Dublin, and then you can fail over to the other ones. I can confirm for each of the CSPs or the software providers that you're using, so Snowflake as an example, or the cloud data platforms that you use, we are audited regularly and continuously, and as an individual customer, you can also enforce your own obligations to audit the implementation of those controls. So there's multiple layers of this, which is one, the physical infrastructure itself that you need to validate with the infrastructure provider. And then the second layer is the data governance and data access that you can enforce. For example, if you're using Snowflake, to restrict the access just for you. And there's things like key management encryption that you can use just to make sure that that access is restricted to you and your organization only. And then there's other things that you can start to consider around replication that's done transparent to you as a customer and being able to restore and recover immediately from another region.